It's working very well. Good afternoon. Pretend like I'm ringing a bell. Bong. So everybody stands. Please. I do have one question. Can you hear me okay on this microphone? Kinda. Okay. Welcome everybody. Good afternoon. This is a special meeting. I'm excited to see all of your faces here. I'd like to start with our invocation and ask Sharon Miracle to join us up front.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So as you know, we all have the power to change the world with our thoughts and with our actions like we do as Rotarians on a regular basis locally and around the world. And we've seen the news recently of natural disasters and devastation, and most recently in Hawaii, and that's where our gifts today are going to go to. So I thought, as we are aligning our collective actions toward good, I thought we should align our collective thoughts towards that as well. So if you are comfortable, please join me in a moment of prayer. Let our hearts and our thoughts be with those who have lost their loved ones, their homes, and community. May they feel supported and comforted, and may they use that energy to derive strength to move forward in their daily lives, to heal and to rebuild. Please carry our thoughts and our prayers to their hearts, and let our actions and gifts be received to help in their recovery and their comfort. Amen.
Thank you, Sharon. You may be seated. I'd like to start by welcoming our guests. If you are a guest to Rotary today, please stand so we can recognize you and celebrate your visit to our club. Welcome. We always love having guests, and if there's any interest in learning about membership, please ask someone, a fellow Rotarian at your table, what that looks like and learn more about being a member of Downtown Rotary. I want to bring back the backpacks. If you remember, a few weeks ago, instead of a typical meeting, we had 550 backpacks donated, and all of you donated to support purchasing the supplies, and then we filled the bags here. And we filled enough to provide backpacks for all of the students at Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School. And it's amazing. We did that. You did that. And on August 22nd, you have the opportunity to help us pass out those backpacks at Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary. On your table is a sign-up sheet, and if you're interested in joining us, they'll be hosting a series of mini assemblies, and we're going to do a quick, talk and celebrate the kids and hand those backpacks out. And when you do come, if you are coming, be sure to wear Rotary. Wear your Rotary shirt, Rotary pins. We want to be dressed up in Rotary. So I welcome you to join us. Also, don't forget, we have our Second Chance Wednesday on Wednesday the 30th, so mark your calendars. Also, on August 31st, you have an opportunity to volunteer with Triumph in their Overdose Awareness Month. And they need volunteers on the 31st from 2 to 3:30. That is also on your table. Please pass that around. And if you have detailed questions, ask Jolene. Raise your hand, Jolene. She's happy to answer any questions you have about volunteering. So now we're going to move on to our marble draw, and I'd like to ask Sherry Green and Jim DeGrasse to join me up front.
Okay, we've got 8 marbles in the bucket. 7 of them are blue, and 1 of them is clear. So this marble draw is a lot like the Powerball. Not. Okay, the difference is that this is not anywhere near as robust of a payout as the Powerball. But the good news is the money goes to Rotary charities, stays in Yakima. So Sherry, why don't we have our district governor pick the winning ticket out, and we have almost $1,000 in.
I accept all major credit cards. 6096.
6096. That's the last digit. 233 6096. Who's got it?
Ryan Anderson.
All right, okay. I gotta hold this really high.
Find the white one.
He's taller than normal. Oh, it's a blue.
Blue.
Okay, so it carries over to next week.
Thank you, Sherry and Jimmy. So remember, come here next week because you have the chance for to win half of a higher pot of money. Next, as John Cooper's making his way up here, I just want to share a little story about this morning. My daughter had her first surgery today, and we know, I convinced her to let me record her, you know those stories where people record their young ones coming out of anesthesia. Well, her funny moment was as they were relaxing her, she looked at the doctor and said, "This is my first time doing drugs." And he laughed and he said, "We call it medication." Anyway, here's John Cooper with Sergeant at Arms.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you saw the email that explained what we're doing a little bit differently, but still having fun at Sergeant at Arms. Now, for our guests, and just to remind everybody, typically we collect funds and gifts, maybe about a couple bucks or so during Sergeant at Arms for all of our charity work. And the funds today will go to help people recover from a disaster in Maui that we've been seeing in the newspaper for the past week. And we welcome all donations, a few bucks or more, but if you give a 5, 10, or 20 or higher dollar bill, I encourage you today with Sergeant at Arms, just give the bill over, rather than ask for change. Think about it. The need is very great, as we've all seen, and we want to show everybody that our club is a club of action. People, as we say, Rotarians are people of action. And I do want to announce there is one Rotarian who anonymously gave us a check today for $500. So let's give that person a round of applause. All right. So let us begin. Now you know why you see some pink in the audience today. And unless you've been under a rock or in some Brazilian rainforest the last month, the truth is, Barbie mania has taken over. Everywhere you go, you hear about this movie. And it's not just the movie. I'm here to tell you that it's a marketing extravaganza that I haven't seen for quite some time, especially with pink-inspired fashions. And as you'll see, a number of our guests, as well as Rotarians, are dressed in the color of pink in support. So for any of you not wearing pink today, I would encourage you to think about a donation. But it's not just our club and others. This Barbie craziness has even hit Rotary. Just this weekend, our Rotary District mascot, Archie, was caught Googling Barbie online. And our very own bobblehead Aaron, which we're now calling Barbie head Aaron, has embraced Barbie mania. Yet, what about the Kens? You know, they were in the movie, and they've been in Barbie's life for many, many years, but they don't seem to always get the attention. It's always about the Barbies. Well,
They're just an accessory, John.
today, though, we salute the Kens of the world. And with that, will all the club members named Ken, I saw at least one Ken Smith, Ken Marble, Ken Meisner, Ken Severin. Let's see, Ken Smith is here. Ken, where are you? Please stand. Now, I'm sure that our very young Ken has had to put up with a couple of those jokes like, "Hey, Ken, where's Barbie?" So thank you for being in the shadow all these years, like all the other Kens have been. And everyone at your table, please make a donation. And, Dana, For anybody who dated or married a Ken, why don't you consider a donation? All right, so let's go back to the very beginning. Ken hit the toy aisles as Barbie's boyfriend in 1961, 2 years after her debut, which means Ken is 2 years younger than Barbie. Kind of makes Barbie a cougar, huh? So, all the cougars who have not donated yet, consider this time your time to give, and I'll let you decide how you define a cougar. All right, but he has been a busy dude over the year. He's not just a Beach Boy slacker like a lot of people believe. Can you believe that he's had over 40 jobs as Ken? He has been a dentist, doctor, firefighter, soccer player, lawyer, barista, fashion model, lifeguard, farmer, accountant, pilot, teacher, and even, like me, a spy. So, given that, if you've had one of these jobs at one time or another, you might want to consider a donation at this time. Or if you always wanted to be a lifeguard or a spy, show some grit. All right, some of you are going to relate to this. In 1973, blonde-haired Ken was introduced and was the first Ken to have hair rooted, embedded in his plastic head. He also came with a mustache and a removable beard and sideburns. Gents, if this was your look in the 70s, 80s, or even today, you might want to consider adding a few dollars to the coffers. Now, few people know this fact. They had a breakup at one time. On Valentine's Day in 2004, after 43 years together, they had a break. It's a true fact. I remember it. Oh, so it was heartbreaking. But luckily, a few years later, Barbie and Ken got back together, and I'm sure we're going to see them in another movie. You know how Hollywood is. There's bound to be a sequel, so I've decided I'm going to start rehearsing and be Uncle Ken, or maybe Grandpa Ken. No, but anyways, seriously, I want to thank you. This concludes our brief walk down the Barbie and Ken memory lane. Your donations will mean a lot. They'll go a long way. We're going to compile all your donations and write that generous check and send it to the Rotary District 5000 Foundation, because they've got a special fire fund. And thank you for all your support for our folks in Maui.
Thank you, John. Now you know why I was dressed in all pink. I usually am not this bright. I'd like to ask our past president, Eric Silvers, to join me to introduce our district governor and speaker for today.
Greetings, Rotarians and guests. I'm so glad to be able to say that I'm back at my own home club. And by the way, when I wear this, that means I'm in official duty. I am assistant governor, and my area is Area 10, which is Yakima, the 3 clubs in Yakima, the 3 clubs in Ellensburg, and also Upper Kittitas. So it's my responsibility to watch over those clubs, to be able to report back to the district. So this is my 2nd year of doing it, so I got 1 more year, so I'm looking forward to it. But I get the pleasure to be able to introduce our district governor. This is Mary Elaine. Give you some highlights about her. She joined Rotary in 2001, and she joined the Sunrise Rotary in Kelowna in 2017. She was born in the Netherlands. She immigrated to Canada with her family, with her parents and her 3 older brothers as a toddler. She landed in Montreal, and she took a motorhome to be able to go across British Columbia. She graduated from Pitt Meadows Secondary School, near the top of her class, and I would probably say at the top of the class there, because she's a very smart young lady. She also pursued her degree at Simon Fraser University. She changed her path real quickly because she met a young man. We were hoping to be able to meet her husband, but he didn't get the chance to make this trip here, Sean, but they relocated to the Okanagan Valley, and they were franchise owners of Little Caesar Pizza. And during her 12 years there, they opened up 13 locations. And she spent her time doing that, and then she decided that she wanted to stay at home with her children, and so that at that time she became a travel consultant, and so she could work from home. She's had many responsibilities in Rotary. Since 2001, she's been, besides club president, she's also been an assistant director, assistant district governor, like what I am. She's also been the chair for the district strategic assistance committee, the shelter box ambassador for Canada, assistant public image coordinator for Rotary, and she loves to facilitate conversations, especially on the district level. She was at PETS as a trainer. She's also been at RLI, the Rotary Institute. By the way, it's going to be in Ellensburg this year, and she'll be talking about that a little bit later here. She's also been a district facilitator. She's also worked on the Membership Matters seminar and multiple Paul Harris Fellows, and she's been recognized in her club and her community for many service responsibilities and several awards there. She's going to serve this year, 2023-24, as our district governor. She's married to Sean. She has 2 sons, a stepdaughter, a son-in-law, and a grandson that she loves to hang out with. When not volunteering, she likes to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and cook bread at a bakery. I thought 6:30 was so early this morning. But she also performs weddings as a marriage commissioner for the Central Okanagan area. She performs 150 weddings average per year. She enjoys golfing, hiking, swimming, camping, sewing, reading, Rotarians and guests. But before that, I got to tell you something. You know, we are a big club in a small town with a big heart, and we're doing a lot of wonderful things in Yakima and around the world. We are Rotarians of action. We change lives. Ladies and gentlemen, Rotarians and guests, this is our District Governor, Mary Elaine Lloyd.
Can I move around a little bit, or do I have to stay around the podium? Okay. Anyone that knows me at all knows I can't stay behind the podium. Daryl's already like, what are you doing back there? First of all, thank you very much, Eric, for the introduction. President Aaron, for the warm welcome. We met last week when I was here. I would like to acknowledge past Assistant Governor John Cooper, and we do have a couple of past governors in the room as well. Mentors and friends of mine, past Governor Greg Lurie, and past Governor Darrell Blue, who is kind of responsible for me being here, by the way. This is your fault. I actually met Darrell several years ago in Penticton. We were there, I think it was a fall training session, and there was an opportunity for up-and-coming Rotarians leaders to sit with some of the current leaders of the district. And we were talking about 5-year and 10-year plans, and Darrell asked me, I remember this so well, we've reminisced about this many times, and he asked me, he says, what is your 5-year Rotary plan? And I said, well, maybe I'd like to be district governor someday. And every time I saw Darrell after that, how's that plan going, by the way? And lo and behold, here I am. So things do happen. Thank you again. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be able to serve the district as the governor. Being able to travel around and see all of the clubs is the best part of the job, by the way. It's really an opportunity to see how the clubs are impacting not only their own club and their own members, but also their community, and in turn, they're impacting the world, as Eric had said. And my husband, unfortunately, he couldn't join us this time, and he's told me many times, he says, I love you, but please, I can't listen to your speech 57 times. It's a little much. But he loves to see the community, so he's been bringing his electric bike with him and really enjoying seeing the projects and seeing where Rotary is. And I think in Yakima in particular, he'd be on his bike for a long time, because there's a lot of Rotary in Yakima. It is an opportunity, again, to see outside of your own Rotary bubble. So those of you that have never gone to another Rotary meeting before, outside of Yakima or outside of your own club, really encourage you to do that. To be able to see how different clubs not only run their meetings, but do their projects, do their fundraisers, and again, serve their community. It's totally different across the board, and it's really been quite fascinating to see that. So why am I here? Well, traditionally, it is the governor's job to come and visit all of the clubs. And those of you who are newer to Rotary, our district is 57 clubs, and we are an international district, which is a little bit unusual. So we're a long, skinny district. So we're in Prosser at the south end, and then we go through the Canadian border up into the Kamloops, Revelstoke area, for those of you that might be familiar with Clearwater, Ashcroft, that area. So we're long and skinny, about 10 or 11 hours driving, point to point, depending on how much trouble you get in at the border. And I tend to get into a little bit of trouble somehow. It's a little weird. But it is my job to tell you about what the theme is for the year, and the Rotary International President, what his theme and what his goals are. And then in turn, the district develops goals as well, and then we come to the club and we say, well, you know, we'd really like you to host, I don't know, 5 or 6 exchange students. And our foundation giving is a little bit down, so if you could double your foundation giving, that would be great. Thanks. And by the way, if you can get 40 members new net in your club, we really enjoy that as well. I'm surprised no one's walked out yet. Yakima's like, all right, sure. And that has been what has been the past. It's not something that I'm personally comfortable with, and I say that with all due respect. In my personal opinion, my job as the district governor is not to tell you what to do or how to run your club or how to set your goals. My job for you is to be the head cheerleader and give you the resources that you need, if you need them, if you ask for them, and to cheer those successes on with you. I'm all about challenging your club and coming up with fantastic new ideas, but let's also celebrate the great things that you're doing. But I will tell you about the Rotary International President. Does anyone know who it is this year? Yeah, so his name is Gordon McNally. He is from Scotland. He's a good Scotsman. And he's from the Rotary Club of South Queensbury. He actually joined Rotary at quite a young age. He was 26 years old when he joined in 1984. Him and his wife, Heather, are quite a lovely couple. Anyone that's had the opportunity to meet him. He's really quite personable, has a wicked sense of humor on him, as I think most Scotsmen probably do. And his wife is a trained opera singer, which is really cool. We had the opportunity to hear her perform. They are really rooted well in their community and in their family. Gordon likes to talk very much about his 2 main advisors, which are his 2 granddaughters. And if you follow him online, you will see some of the photos, and he says that the granddaughters really do ground him. The theme for the year is Create Hope in the World. And this is something that I really like to share with the clubs, because I think you can take that back to your club and think about how can you continue the success in your club and grow using that theme. So Create Hope in the World. Well, there's a few themes, but sub-themes around that. And what Gordon says is he wants us to promote peace, he wants us to help those affected by conflict and disaster, and he wants us to maintain momentum of initiatives by past leaders. So let's value those that have come before us. Let's not reinvent the Rotary wheel every year. I get that there's a new president every year, your board changes probably every 2 or 3 years on the terms, right? Why recreate the Rotary wheel every time? So I thought about that a little bit from the district level, and we'll talk about that in just a second. The main word in Create Hope in the World is hope. And what Gordon says is we need to help the world heal from destructive conflicts, and in turn, it will help us to achieve lasting change, not only for ourselves, but all around the world. So how do we do that? Well, we start with one person at a time. And Gordon tells a really heartwarming and heart-wrenching story. A number of years ago, when he was in Thailand, and it was shortly after the tsunami, the Boxing Day tsunami. And this, by the way, is also the birthplace of Shelterbox. So there was a member, kind of a side story, there was a member from the UK who was also there to serve, and he came up with the concept of Shelterbox, which is now Shelterbox International, and it is the first major partner project of Rotary International. But that's another talk. So there was Gordon. He was out on the beach and he saw this woman, And the woman had lost everything. She had lost her husband, she had lost her 2 children, she lost her home, and she lost her way of life. But she had a smile on her face. And Gordon approached her and they had a conversation. And at the end of the conversation, Gordon said to the woman, why are you smiling? And she said, it's the Rotary wheel. She said, I see that wheel. It's on your hat, it's on the shirt. People have put magnets on the sides of the cars and on the boats. It's the Rotary wheel. I know that I can come back from this. I know that I can rebuild. I know that there's hope. And before Gordon left that beach, the woman took an object off of her. She had a chain around her neck, and on that chain was a seashell. And if you go to Evanston, Illinois now, the home of Rotary International's headquarters, and you go up to the very top of that high-rise building, you go into the president's office, and there's a beautiful view of Chicago, Illinois, but on that desk, you will find that seashell. And the logo of Create Hope in the World has sort of a spiral, and the colors are symbolic of Scotland and of the other themes around Create Hope in the World, but the design itself is very much about that seashell. So think about that when you are creating hope in Yakima. He also talked about the power of continuity and talking about, again, the success of leaders from before. And he's talking about the End Polio Now program. Eric, in one of our visits earlier, well, I guess that was today, he was talking about traveling to Ethiopia and helping to vaccinate children against polio. And I thought about it from a district level. And I immediately thought about past Governor Carl Ruther in Leavenworth and his program for the Pollinator Highway. So how many people were here when Carl came last year and he had his beautiful hat on? It was a beautiful hat. Had all the flowers and the branches and all the things. His wife Denise had created that hat. She's a very talented florist. So I thought, I really like this program. I actually love the Pollinator program for a number of reasons. It's a really easy way to engage every single club member. We had clubs that were passing out little packets of wild seeds. We had clubs that were working with elementary schools and putting community gardens right on elementary school property. We had clubs working with seniors who needed something to do, something to keep their minds working, to have their hands in the ground. There was activity everywhere. And it was something that anyone could engage in because it's not something terribly expensive either. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. So there was a lot of inspiration and motivation and people were moving forward. And I see even in the 15 or 20 club visits that I've done so far, that there's still a lot of projects out there that people are getting ready to do in the following spring. So I wanted to continue that. And I needed a shtick, but I wasn't gonna wear the hat. It was a cute hat, but I don't do hats. I don't do tiaras either, but I really like the tiaras, by the way. So I needed a shtick, and John Cooper already introduced him a little bit, and some of you that follow him on social media may have already seen, there he is. Friends, this is Archie M. Clump. He's named after Arch Clump of the Arch Clump Society, and he is our District 5060 official Garden Gnome mascot. So he's going to be traveling the district and helping to raise awareness for those pollinator gardens. But it turned into something completely different. So when I was in Seattle for pets, I met Gord McNally himself. And I'm very proud to say that I am the first district governor-elect, and I think Darryl can probably attest to this, to get the incoming international president in the bathtub. True story, right? It is a true story. That's a whole other side story. He was clothed, there was 42 other people, it's okay. So I had Gord sign the back of Archie. So Gord McNally has signed Archie. He's also been signed by Drew Kessler, who is one of our Rotary International directors. And at the end of the Rotary year, we're going to auction off Archie for the Rotary Foundation. So he is now not only raising awareness for the pollinator gardens, and we're having a little fun, but he's also raising awareness for the Rotary Foundation. He's acquired some pins and some stickers. He has a bumblebee on him that was made by one of the other Rotary clubs I've visited. So they are crocheting bumblebees and selling them in the women's auxiliary gift store at their local hospital as a fundraiser. I've also had to air tag him. True story. Every year we have a district changeover event, and at that event, Archie was introduced and he was known out. He was gone. I had an idea who took him, so I sent a text message to past Governor Richard Durock. His wife, anyone that knows his wife, Robin, is a little bit of a troublemaker, so I knew she had something to do with it. So I sent her a text and I said, return the gnome and no one gets hurt. So about 45 minutes later, I received a couple of photos on my phone, and Archie was in a bar. True story. He was in a bar, and he was side by side. He had a couple of beer steins there. He was double-fisting those beer steins. I could see a couple of past governors in the background giggling. The next morning, Archie was returned, and upon his return, there was a donation made to the Rotary Foundation. And last week, at a club visit, Archie was actually presented with his very first Paul Harris Fellow. So he is wearing his pin, he has his certificate, so he will continue to raise money for the foundation, which is kind of a cool thing. The final focus for Create Hope in the World is a really important one, and that is mental health. Mental health is something that affects every single person in this room. Whether you're struggling with mental health yourself, whether there's someone in your family, someone in your work community, or anyone in this room. So Gordon says that we need to offer hope to those affected by mental health, and that Rotary should be known as an organization that takes care not only of its community members, but of its very own club members. And for Gordon, he suggests it starts with one question, and that question is, how are you? And then he suggests that you add one more word to that question, and you say, how are you really? How are you really? So what does that mean for your club? Well, it means thinking about those members that maybe you haven't seen for a little while. Think about, and every club that I've visited has those members. So think about picking up the phone, make a phone call, send a text, send an email, offer a conversation, a walk down the street, a hug. Where's Brad that I met at the board meeting earlier? Brad will give you a hug. I've learned this of Brad. Give a hug or a handshake. Because a lot of people just need to feel valued. They need to know that somebody gives a damn. And I apologize for my language, but people need to know, right? And that's sometimes all that it takes. From a club level, I am fairly confident with the power of the Yakima Club that you have quite a few people here that have an expertise in mental health. So think about, and I know that with this club, you have your speakers lined up until 2026. But if you have a cancellation, I really encourage you to think about having a mental health focus, or maybe even outside of your own club meetings, have a speaker series about mental health. There's a ton of service projects out there, again, that focus on mental health, and it really actually goes back to the pollinator gardens as well. Mental health can mean many things. It can mean physical activity, it can mean seeing a therapist, it can mean doing something with your hands, right? So whether it's gardening or music or making jewelry, whatever it may be. So think about those things that you can do. We have some clubs that are working on projects with service animals. We have clubs doing smaller projects with suicide awareness organizations, so making little bracelets. Lots of different things you can do. Now this can all be super overwhelming, I get it. Erin's like, oh, this to-do list is getting long. But there's lots of resources for you. We have 57 clubs in this district. Those clubs range in size from 7 members strong, and I use that word strong with love and all respect, because that little club, and actually we've got a couple of them, those little clubs are small but mighty, and they're doing phenomenal things in their clubs. And you, as you probably know, are the largest club in the district, so congratulations for that. But you also, I just had a tour of the aquatic building, unbelievable by the way, and I've seen Franklin Park, and I've seen the Rotary Marketplace, and all these amazing things that you're doing. And you're also in a very fortunate position that you're in a community with 2 other Rotary clubs, and several others in outlying areas. So working on those partnerships and collaboration that you're already doing, I really congratulate you on that. Because those smaller clubs, they may not have the financial resources that your club has, but they've got a lot of heart. and they are still people of action, and they still want to do things. So looking at some of those smaller clubs in those outlying communities and offering some mentorship and some resources is a great way to start. As I said before, I'm here to help you. I'm here, not that you need a lot of help, this is a great club, but I am here to cheer on those successes. We need to know about it. So make sure you're sharing that on your social media. Your club page is super active. That's where I learned about Erin Bobblehead, and I learned about the confetti on her first meeting. That was pretty cool. But I see all this happening, and it's really fantastic. If you have social media yourself, make sure that you're bragging about your own Rotary Club so that others can see that as well. We have our district website, so if you go to Rotary District 50 or Rotary5060.org, you will find our website, and there you will also find a district directory, which, by the way, is run by one Rotarian. That district directory is a ton of work. Anyone that's done that kind of work, so Ron Hooper is up in Salmon Arm, and he basically tries to put that together all by himself. We used to print it off, but we found that it gets outdated as soon as you print it. So it's now online, you can download that, and he updates it about 4 times a year or so. And that directory is really a plethora of information for you. We have our district newsletter. Our district newsletter is run by one of your very own Yakima Rotarians, by the way. So Quinn, where's Quinn? I know she's here, there she is. Quinn. And I've been pushing this newsletter at all of my club visits because I really, really, really want to send less emails. You're welcome. I've learned this as a governor, you get a lot of emails, so I'm trying not to send them all out to all of you. So the key to that is to get as much content as we can into that district newsletter. The deadline is usually the 5th of the month, and then Quinn usually has it out within a couple of weeks or so. Sometimes it's even quicker. So if you have information, you don't even have to go through the assistant governor if you didn't want to. I usually send people to the assistant governor, but I'm sure you could probably just send it right to Quinn. So brag about the projects that you're doing. Everybody in the district sees that newsletter, so brag about those projects. Have a bit of content, a nice photo, just throw it in a Word doc. Right, Quinn, that works? That works. Awesome. And just send it to Quinn. She's sick of me because I keep sending, I'll send an article, I'm like, wait, one more, send. Oh, wait, one more. Sorry, Quinn. It's okay. Finally, we have our own social media as well. So if you go to Rotary Clubs of District 5060 on Facebook, we also have an Instagram page, and we've been trying to share as many things as we can from other clubs. So if you are on social media, search out some of those other clubs, not only in the surrounding area, but in our district, because there's some really cool things happening. And this is where a lot of that partnership and collaboration actually begins. So in some of my travels, I'm actually seeing clubs from both sides of the border that are now partnering up because they have similar environmental projects going on. We have clubs that want to partner up for youth exchange programs as well. So lots of cool partnerships happening, and a lot of that is starting at really a grassroots level. We do have a couple of events coming up for you as well. We do have the Rotary Learning Institute coming up. How many graduates of the Rotary Learning Institute we have, RLI? Oh, quite a few. Okay, so October 21st and 22nd, you can head over to Ellensburg. We're going to allow about 24 participants max for that. So registration is going out in the next couple of days. I actually met with the coordinator this morning at her meeting. So that'll be coming up. It's a really great opportunity for any of you newer members. It's a good chance to get kind of an overview of all things Rotary. It is a facilitated session. We usually have 5 or 6 different facilitators, so you don't have to listen to the same person the whole day. And we do some small group activities as well as larger group. 2 days and it's done, and really, really great. Again, it's a great opportunity to network as well. And finally, we have the district conference. I love the district conference. Okay, write this down, friends. May 2nd to 5th, we're going to be in Penticton, British Columbia. So traditionally, the conference is held in the home city of the governor. Anyone that knows the Canadian side of our border, it's very, very expensive to run a conference in Kelowna. So we decided to go back down to Penticton. The last conference there was a number of years ago. It's a little bit more central, so if you head on to Highway 97, head north, update your passport, go through the border, and then drive like another 45 minutes or so, depending on how fast you're going. Just be careful. And then you'll be in Penticton. So we have some service projects we're going to be doing for that conference. We've got a couple of really great speakers already lined up with a couple more in the wings, and we're going to be announcing those names shortly. So if you go to the district website, you'll see the registration, and you can come and hang out with us from May 2nd to 5th. And bid on Archie. You can take Archie home, right? It's great. Friends, I want to thank you again for your attention. I know district governors come through and not everybody's all that thrilled about it, but I do appreciate all of your attention. This was the one club, so all the past governors love to give advice, and I take it. I don't know if I listen to it, but I take it. And they've all said at the beginning when they first start their tours, the big Yakima Club. I'm always a little nervous about the big Yakima Club. This was great. This was fun. Thank you again for all that you do for your community and for the world, and I encourage you once again to please to continue to create hope in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming to visit us.
Yes,
What a
thank you.
pleasure and honor to have you in Yakima. And please make a point to reach out to Mario Lane. Very easy to talk to, fun to talk to, and you always have such great ideas. So it's been really great working with you. And as a gift for being our speaker, we're going to make a contribution to Northwest Harvest, which is a local food distribution center, in your name. And we will give you an Aaron bobblehead as well.
Archie needs a friend.
I hope there's some way to tie her to Archie. I always said those will end up in a yard sale after my year, like 5 cents a piece or something like that. So I am very excited to introduce a special guest we have today. State Treasurer Mike Pelliciotti is here to join us and say a few words. And afterwards, going to be touring the Rotary Marketplace. So we're very excited that you've come to join our Yakima Downtown Rotary Club, and we'd love to hear an update from you.
Well, thank you to Aaron, and thank you so much for the opportunity to join all of you today. It's actually good to see a couple of friendly faces in the audience. As Aaron was saying, my name is Mike Pelliciotti. I am your state treasurer. I was elected in 2020 statewide, started up in January of 2021. If it's all right, I usually talk a few minutes about what the office does, because people are like, hey, we have a state treasurer, that's great, that makes sense, it probably has something to do with money, which is true. But talk a little bit about the office, some of the things that we're working on, and then if time permits, open up for a couple of questions, which I find to be kind of the most effective use of time, if that's all right. As Aaron was pointing out, obviously I'm the state treasurer. As treasurer of the state of Washington, I kind of have essentially 3 kind of core functions as state treasurer. One is I handle certain investments for the state. So I manage about $35 billion of certain investments that I directly manage in the state treasurer's office, or I should say that the office manages. I also manage certain kind of what we call debt management for the state of Washington. So when we talk about debt management, debt is kind of a fancy way to refer to the bonds that the state issues. You might be familiar with bonds. I always try to explain that a little bit. Bonds are essentially kind of the same way when you have a mortgage on your house, right? You get the money up front. Obviously, it's a form of debt. You pay it off over the life of that house. Same with maybe a car loan, something like that. The state does the same thing with certain projects that the state has. So while we actually balance our operating budget every year in the state of Washington, which is a good thing, that's kind of the money in, money out, we balance that every year in the state of Washington. We have 2 other budgets as well. One is our capital budget, which are kind of capital projects, right? Buildings, roads, school buildings, bridges, not bridges, could be like a park, something like that, something that's a tangible item. So we have our capital budget related to that, and bonds are issued for the creation of those projects. And then we also have our transportation budget, bridges, roads, ferries, things like that, in which bonds are issued for that as well. So those are most certainly forms of debt. There are about $22 billion worth of bonds that have been issued by the state of Washington.
Yeah, am I walking too far away?
The battery may have died.
Or is it just dying?
That might just died.
This one I think is good.
How's that?
Good.
Oh, wow. No, she said it's not as good. This one's like reverberating now. This is pretty good. So,
I don't know these
and let me know if I'm not
microphones.
supposed to walk too far away or anything on the microphone, but I just want to make sure I get a chance to connect with everyone. So we have kind of this transportation budget, right? Then there's bonds issued related to that. So it's not my job as state treasurer to figure out what those projects are. That's up to your legislators. You actually have, Senator King, who I work with quite a bit, who's ranking member on transportation. He works a lot on the transportation bonds, that issue. It's up to the legislators to figure out what those individual projects are. But it's up to me as state treasurer to kind of manage the debt that's issued. So I try to get kind of the best rates that we can related to the bonds that are issued. So that's the second thing, the debt management aspect. And then the third thing is I serve as the state's banker, right? So I handle the cash flow for the state of Washington. So that's money in, money out. That affects, we handle about $250 billion a year in the state of Washington in terms of cash flow in and out. So that's kind of the third kind of core function for the state. But I also serve on different boards and commissions that handle different policy issues, fiscal policy issues for the state. So you might be familiar with our GET committee or 529 for your kids or grandkids' education to invest in that. I serve on that committee. Our state investment board, which manages our kind of state pension fund investments, serve on that. Our housing finance commission handles housing finance issues. Our economic development finance authority serves small business tax credits, things along those lines. While there are a lot of these different boards and commissions, I often serve as a unifying kind of presence on those boards to kind of get a picture related to kind of the financial health of the state and different aspects related to that. So while that kind of represents a lot of the core functions of the work, when I came in 2021, before being elected state treasurer, I served in our state legislature for 2 terms. And so, I came in to the office of state treasurer, and as a part of that, I went to the office, went to folks in the office, and I said, hey, what are some things that are working well? What are some things we can improve upon? I talked to folks and I said, well, Mike, things are working pretty well for the most part, but some of the things we have to navigate is it seems like quite often the legislature keeps kind of mucking things up for us. And I said, well, as former legislator, I'm more than aware that the legislature is capable of mucking things up. But I said, help me understand that a little bit more. He said, well, we have these laws that are outdated. We have things that, bills are passing that kind of impact aspects of financial health, and things that affect working families, financial issues, and things like that. And I said, well, we can actually impact the legislation before it is written and before it passes into law in a way to better meet those needs. And so, when I came in as state treasurer, one of the focuses I had was to just kind of update laws and make things work a little better. Not necessarily pass new laws or things, but there are a lot of laws that are outdated. A lot of different policies and programs that were created in the late 70s, early 80s with a totally different interest rate environment. Things that just weren't working quite right. And so we actually passed into law, because as a statewide elected official, I can actually request legislation to the legislature. And we actually requested and passed into law as many bills as the office had in the previous 5 years combined. Things that just make things work better, get updated, things that kind of just make things kind of come together a little bit better. And so I felt really good about that. But one of the things that also was important for me as state treasurer was making sure that I kind of understood and appreciated what my role was as state treasurer. Because in a lot of ways, being state treasurer, the power of state treasurer is only so good as people actually listen to what the state treasurer has to say. Right? It's like so many of you here that are professionals. You can be the best professional at whatever you're doing. Well, you can give the best advice to your clients or whatever the case may be. It's only so good as actually follow your advice, right? Your patients, your clients, whatever the case may be. Right? And in a lot of ways, that's the same as state treasurer. But one of the things that was important for me as state treasurer in coming in was saying, hey, look, it's not my job as kind of the state's banker to tell the legislature how to spend money, right? Like you don't want to, write a check for a new car and have your banker give you a call and say, hey, I saw you bought the latest model, you sure you don't want a used car instead? Right? It's not the job of your banker. The job of your banker is to cash the check. But what I also serve as is really the state's chief financial officer. And what I do believe my job is to give clear recommendations to the legislature on what good financial health would be. So we made 3 recommendations when I came into office, 3 clear recommendations to the legislature on different financial guardrails that should be in place related to the budgeting process. Recommendation number 1 was to make sure that our reserves, which are kind of like our savings that we have, would be returned to our pre-pandemic reserve level. So if you think about it, when the COVID economic recession hit, the legislature completely drew down the reserves. That's not unusual. Most cities and states did that. That's how things kind of stay stable. But what is critical is when times get good, what do you need to do? You got to replenish those savings, right? And so I clearly communicated to the legislature the importance of returning those reserves to those pre-pandemic reserve levels. It was not necessarily easy to do. I can assure you, trying to convince the legislature in the last week and a half of the legislative session to pull back a couple $2 billion they'd already earmarked, not easy. I can assure you, not an easy job. But they followed our recommendation related to that. That's great. Our second recommendation was related to pensions. And the recommendation was clear, to make sure that we were meeting our actuarial obligations related to our pension contributions, and that we were putting additional money that was available to shore up the underfunded pension obligations related to the older aspects of our pensions. The legislature followed that recommendation as well. And as a result, we now have, depending on how you calculate it, the number 1 or number 3 best funded pension in the United States. That is a big deal, right? That is important, not just because it's important to make sure that pensioners get the pensions that they've earned, but there is no more expensive debt you can have than an underfunded pension liability. You can look at a lot of states and municipalities that are in a real pickle right now on this because they haven't been responsible in meeting those needs. That was critical. And again, there's no more expensive debt you can have because during my first year, on our state investment board, we had a 22.5% return on the pension funds that we had. Now that's not constant, right? Just look at your 401ks right now to know that you don't kind of ride that out every year. But that's part of the return you get over a period of time to make sure that things that you're kind of maximizing the return. That's actually money that's being contributed through the investment returns we're able to do. So they followed that recommendation, that second recommendation. The third recommendation, which was also a challenge, has been to make sure that the legislature maintains our debt service ratio. Don't worry, I'm going to break this down. Our debt service ratio at 5% or less in terms of the capital debt that I was talking about. Let me tell you what that means. So if you think of the revenue coming into the state, while we have significant debt in the state of Washington, that debt remains manageable so long as that debt service payment, the amount you're paying on that past debt, remains at 5% or less of the total revenue coming into the state. So if you think of it as like, you have income coming in, a certain amount goes back to mortgages or car loans, whatever, you don't want that percentage to be too high related to that. Well, 5% or less is viewed to be quite manageable in terms of the debt service ratio. But it also affects the amount of debt the legislature can issue, right? Because there's no more bipartisan support, I can assure you, in Olympia, because it takes a 2/3 vote. There's no more bipartisan support than issuing new bonds and new debt. There's great consensus on that. But it was important that we clearly communicate to the legislature that it remained manageable. They followed that recommendation as well. Why is that important? That's important because all of that represents our good financial health as a state. And one of the things that was particularly helpful and important related to that is we get a credit rating that's reviewed every year. The same way you might have a credit score that determines what your kind of debt, kind of payments are likely to look like, whether people let you borrow money at all, or how much interest you're paying on that. You get a credit score, right? Well, the state gets a credit score as well, as do municipalities, but it's called a credit rating. Well, one of the preeminent credit rating agencies is Moody's. And they just reviewed our credit rating again about 3 weeks ago, and just reaffirmed a AAA credit rating for the state of Washington. And that's the top credit rating we can have. All of that is important, right? Because these are the things that feed on each other. And so, and why is a good credit rating important? Because when I came in as state treasurer, one of the first things I did in 2021 is within 3 months, was raising the alarm that I thought inflation would not be transitory, that we would see it for a while, and as a result, the Federal Reserve would increase interest rates to temper that inflationary pressure. So what did we do in the office? We refinanced every bit of debt we could legally refinance in the state of Washington before those interest rates rose. And in doing so, saved the people of the state of Washington $489 million in money that was otherwise going to Wall Street and wasted interest payments, that is instead staying with the people of the state of Washington to do important work. And as the interest rates have now risen, the other side of our house, on the investment side, has hugged that interest rate curve very tightly, where we are now, through the investments we're doing on behalf of the local governments, returning over $3 million more a day to local governments. That money they weren't expecting, that they weren't receiving 2 years ago, to meet essential community needs within local governments. And for the state of Washington, sending over $1 billion over the next 4-year outlook, because we've hugged that curve so tightly. And much more effectively than a lot of other governments have, who kind of thought early on that they were going to invest in kind of longer term interest rates that were much lower than what we've now seen them increase to. So, what I'd say, and I'll wrap up with this, is, for all of the challenges in the world today, and no shortage of challenges, I don't need to tell anyone here this, your state finances are not one of them. And I hope that lets you sleep a little bit better at night. And, and while that is important, I guess I'll finish up and just close with this, which is, for all of that work that's able to be done, I always have one ask. It's the only thing I ask when I do these talks, which is, this is being done by a team in my office that's only about 65 folks. These are very talented folks, many of whom have spent 20, 30, 40, in some cases over 50 years, serving the people of the state of Washington through their office in the Treasurer's office. And I can assure you, could be making 2, 3, 4 times or more in the private sector. But they continue to do this work and bring these billions of dollars of savings to you as a public service. So my only ask is if you bump into one of these 65 folks from the Office of the State Treasurer, that you thank them for their public service and what they're doing on your behalf. So with that, I will close. I'm happy to open up for any questions if there's time, if people have any
Time for a question or two. Are there any questions?
So it sounds like there's great successes. What's one thing throughout this term that you wanted to that you haven't been able to accomplish?
Great question. So for those who didn't hear the question, hey, things are moving okay, what's one thing that hasn't been accomplished yet? 2 things. One, which is what I'm doing here later today here in Yakima, which is talking about retirement security. Actually, we'll be at the convention center later today. We're doing a retirement security town hall, and I'm talking about the fact that 2 out of 3 millennials today have 0 retirement savings. 0. 1 out of 4 gig workers. 1 out of 4 gig workers today in a recent poll said they plan to work until they die. That is not sustainable. That is a potential crisis for our state treasury 20 or 30 years from now, both from a revenue side and in terms of the social service needs. And so that's why I'm raising that alarm now. The same way I was raising the alarm related to inflationary pressure early in my term, I'm doing that now related to retirement 20 or 30 years before it's a potential crisis. That's why I'm going around the state. So that's one. The second is a proposal kind of referred to as Washington Future Funds, endorsed actually by the Yakima Herald when I came through here several months ago, bipartisan support, which is just addressing and making sure we're providing essential needs for the people of our state when they get older, and have the legislature set money aside that we can then invest so that when those children get older, those funds are there to meet those essential needs. That's something else that the legislature has yet to pass that I feel is critical as we just kind of work forward to make sure we're being responsible in terms of our future needs. It's a great question.
What's your investment committee's position on GSE?
On ESG? Yes. ESG. So the question was kind of what's my thought related to ESG, which for those who aren't familiar stands for environmental, social, and governance issues. So ESG has suddenly become a rather political issue. Never was. It was generally viewed by all investment professionals as a core function of any type of investment strategy. But let me tell you what it is. It refers to consideration of certain material factors that might affect long-term investments. So while it's broadly been viewed as environmental issues, the idea that like, hey, I want to invest in this insurance company. We're going to own, as institutional investors, this insurance company for the next 30 or 40 years. Well, are they making considerations as to whether they can provide essential services and what the impact of climate change, for example, could have on them? Are they going to have to pay out tens of billions of dollars like they're going to have to in Maui related to fires that took place? Or forest fires here in the valley, right? Like, that will have an impact on the bottom line of that company decades from now. Are they at least considering that and having a plan laid out on how to address how that might impact their investments? Or, for example, and I'm doing the environmental example, let's say you're an oil company, right? What's your plan 50 years from now? Folks are moving toward renewables, right? For their cars, electric vehicles, it's going to happen over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Is your focus on short-term profits, and you're a CEO who's coming in just trying to maximize profit for shareholders for the next year or two? Or do you have a plan for the next 30, 40, 50 years on how you are going to transition and allow this company to continue to exist? That's some of the factors. The social aspect is what involves kind of employment considerations. What are you doing for worker rights? Are you making sure that you're investing in your workers long-term so that they stick around? Or are you just trying to work them to the bone and so that they don't stick around? And that has an impact. We saw what happened with Southwest Airlines, right? It was short-term profit-oriented. It impacted, it kind of broke the system. A lot of folks retired, broke the system, there was no long-term plan. And then for the governance, it's making sure there are anti-fraud efforts, making sure you don't have corporate fraud taking place. Well, this is suddenly become a political issue because guess what? As institutional investors who care about our long-term investment, we're owning this company not just today, but for the next 10, 20, 30 years. Well, we want to make sure that company we're investing in now is still going to exist 30 years from now. They're not just short-term profit-oriented. We've had a lot of CEOs who are like, we don't like that corporate accountability. We don't really like it. So what have they done? Is they've said, well, you know, if we have an anti-corporate accountability movement, that's probably not going to work super well. People aren't going to buy into that. But if we tap into it and refer to it as woke capitalism, guess what? Boom. And we've got to get it on the right kind of, if we get it out, push it on the right media, and it's going to take off because no one knows what ESG is. If we just make it a boogeyman, then suddenly people aren't going to like it, they're going to contact their legislators, and they're going to start doing things about it. So I have a lot of strong thoughts. I think ESG generally, there's a lot to criticize about it. I think a lot of it's also fluff in terms of how people are presenting things. But what is important is not to forget who is pushing that and why they do it. It's not some organic movement that came out of nowhere that some people want to take on. It's being led by folks who don't want corporate accountability on it. So my thought is there needs to be corporate accountability. As an institutional investor, I want to make sure they are not short-term profit-oriented, but they're thinking long-term in terms of the viability of the company.
Thank you. I swear this microphone was performing a lot worse earlier. Thank you so much for your comments, for your questions. Just a reminder that we'll be back at the Yakima Convention Center next week with Michael Kane. And the following week we'll have Dan Newhouse for a legislative update. And do not forget, mark your calendar, September 7th is our Rotary picnic at Cowiche Creek Brewery. And it is a family-friendly location, so bring your spouse, your kids, grandkids, whatever you'd like. Again, Mario Lane, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. And I'm sure you both are available for questions if people want to come up and introduce themselves, and then we'll meet you at 1:30 at the Rotary Marketplace. And that is the end of our meeting, and we are adjourned. Thank you.